It's Just a Library by me. I wrote this story. This is part 2, and I hope you enjoy it. Sunsets can be a lot of things. They can be a beautiful wonder of nature to behold as the earth turns away from the great source of burning hot plasma for a short time, only to be seen later in the form of a sunrise. It can be a physical display of time. The sun is setting, the workday comes to a close, at least for some people. The sunset can also be a reminder of how preciously short our lives are and how we never know how many sunsets we are going to see. For all we know, this one could be the last. I wish so much that I had taken the time to truly appreciate that sunset in all its glowing orange and yellow beauty. I had no idea that this one would be the last sunset I see in a very, very long time. I mean, how was I supposed to know that as I was heading home, poorly underdressed for the chilly weather, shivering and desperately fighting with myself to either go home or turn around while I still have the chance, that the final sunset in an endless stretch of years was fading away before my very eyes, and I was too naive and distracted to appreciate it, to give it more than a woeful, worried glance before speeding up my pace. Sunsets can be beautiful, yes, but in this case, all this sunset was to me was a creeping terror and a warning of danger which may or may not have even been there in the first place due to my own paranoia. As I mentioned before, I'm a single woman living by myself now, raised by both parents to be cautious of creeps and potential abductors. I don't feel as afraid now as an adult as I would have when I was a kid, but even so, some people do target adults too. I hate to imagine the types of horrendous things those types of people would want me for. I was about halfway home at this point, sincerely regretting my lack of jacket, but grateful that I would be able to go home soon and turn on the heat. I never keep the lights on when I'm away, or the heat, or anything really. Gotta save power, right? Some people leave their heat on so that when they come home it will already be warm, but I never do that. Well, by the time I actually did come home, this was a decision I instantly came to hate myself for. Just this once. It was just as cold inside my own home as it was outside. Possibly colder? No, that couldn't be right. After taking my shoes off, I beelined it for my thermostat and cranked it up. However, I never go above 25 degrees Celsius. I have this paranoid feeling that if I ever go above that temperature, the house will catch on fire. Mostly because of the smell. I tried setting the heat to 30 degrees one time, and the burning smell from the heaters all around the house, it was just too much. It was too much. My head felt foggy, my body lost all energy in an instant, and I wanted to pass out, which I did end up doing. I didn't wake up for 2 days. Anyway, that's all in the past. Once bitten, twice shy. Don't go above 25 degrees. Period. I was lucky this time. I had managed to make it home just as the sun had let go of its final bit of light and night was taking over the sky. Before I could forget, I scrambled over to the door and I locked it. I wouldn't be very safe if I just left my door unchecked. I mean, anything could just waltz in here. Anyone, I mean. No, anything sounds about right. As much as I wanted to give in to the desire to just drag myself up the stairs and flop down into bed, I had to eat first. I didn't feel like making anything big. I never do, actually. I don't eat much. Most of my meals consist of easy-to-make things you can either throw in the oven or microwave or don't have to cook at all. I looked in the freezer first. There wasn't much there, just an old box of pizza pockets and some ice cream. I didn't want to eat anything cold when it was already cold outside, though sometimes I did it just for kicks. Not tonight. I settled on the pizza pockets, grabbing the box and getting them unwrapped and on a plate. I winced slightly when I noticed there was a lot of freezer burn on them. I did my best to scrape off the bits of ice before putting them into the microwave anyway. The time it took for them to cook, flip them over, and cook again felt so much longer than it should have, probably because of how tired I was feeling. As should have been expected, they were stale when I ate them, and I did eat them. I didn't see the point of wasting food, and I was far too exhausted to make something else. As was the case every night, my extreme fatigue wasn't nearly enough to make me actually fall asleep right away when I crawled under my covers. I really need to learn not to sleep with my phone near me. That's such a distraction. No, an addiction. I fell asleep around 1 a.m. Remember that feeling I mentioned before, the one about wanting to go back to the library? It was the first thought I had when I woke up the following morning, or should I say afternoon? I way overslept, which is normal for me. However, I decided against it for now. After all, I had a movie to watch. I smiled ever so slightly as I recalled the fact that I had taken out the very first item ever from the library using my very own library card. Despite the fact it was already the afternoon, I decided to make myself something breakfasty. I looked in my fridge and saw an almost empty carton of eggs. 1 egg was left, about a tablespoon's worth of milk left in the bag, and 4 pieces of bread left. Oh, and there was a jar of pickles, some margarine, and some bottled water in there, too. With the exception of the pickles, I had just enough to make myself a breakfast. Egg and toast with a nice cup of Earl Grey tea sounded real nice. I always afford tea. Even if I have no food in the house, I always have tea. I'm not the best cook, but I managed to make a slightly passable version of an over-easy egg before I sat down on my couch and got my anime movie on. I never get used to the feeling of watching something on the TV compared to the computer. No one is going to walk in and suddenly catch me watching anime and make me feel embarrassed like a few years ago. But even so, I still get paranoid when watching the TV. A few hours later, once the food was eaten, movie watched, and a small load of laundry started, I decided to finally give in to that feeling that had been nagging at me before. I was going to go back to the library, and this time, I was going to come prepared. This time I wasn't going to just bring a measly purse with me. I was packing a whole bag. A backpack, specifically. I figured I would want to stay at the library for a good portion of the day, so, as long as I could bear it. And I didn't want to run into a situation where I would be forced to go home before I wanted to. From what I had already observed of other people who went to the same library, food and water was definitely allowed, so long as you were quiet and didn't make a mess. Even the lady at the front desk had a cup of coffee at her desk the last time I saw her. That in mind, I packed a few snacks and I had them stored away in the cupboard. Not that I had much to begin with. Maybe I would stop by the corner store on the way home and pick up a few things if it wasn't too dark by then. Jacket on, not going to make the same mistake twice. Bag packed and keys in hand, I headed out of my house, heading straight to the library. I was excited as I started walking, and I almost didn't notice it at first. Such an obvious, painfully ominous darkness. I made it about 10 feet from my front door before I finally snapped back to reality. Why? Why was it so dark outside? What time was it? I checked my phone quickly, frozen in place. 3 p.m. In the afternoon? I felt a shiver run through me, not from the cold, I was wearing my jacket after all, but from the sheer dread and realization that not only was it dark outside, but I was outside in the dark, alone. A random passage from something I read on the internet crossed my mind in that moment. We aren't afraid of being alone in the dark. We're afraid of not being alone in the dark. If anyone knows where that's from, please tell me, because I want so badly to remember. Forget the library. I need to get inside my house now. I turned around, walking back towards my home. I didn't care if it was the middle of the day or how excited I had been to return to the library. It wasn't safe to be out. What? I was at the library, standing right in front of those big glass doors which seemed to whisper to me and beckon me inside. I felt like my heart had stopped in that very moment as it began to hurt me, the pain in my chest growing more and more until I did the only rational thing I could do. I went inside.